Welcome, everyone, to this wonderful, blessed 30th day of November in this month of Powerful Gateway on this next episode of Ascension Hour with Rev HoniB and her guests. And today is a very, very special guest for me, as I'm very tickled and excited for Reverend Alan Dale Hoffman to be here to share his profound wisdom of ascension with us. I've been waiting for this. I was so excited that you accepted the invitation. So thank you so much for blessing us with your grace, with your presence, and most importantly, that frequency behind the wisdom of your words on your walk of ascension that is going to share with our audience today. So thank you so much, Reverend Alan Dale Hoffman, for being here. Welcome.
Thank you, Dale Allen Hoffman. But yeah,
look, I said it backwards.
That's all right. No, well, it's funny because I'm used to seeing it that way. My name, like signing up on forums and stuff. But yeah, what was I going to say? No, yeah, I still remember when we first met and everything. So awesome.
So thank you for being here. And, there is this, I do put words a little bit like this and somehow the registration. So, and if I say it, please let me know, because there's this anchoring of it. The word, sometimes I put it goes backwards in my brain. So thank you for sharing that. So welcome. And just as usual, before we get started, we're going to go ahead and just put the prayer around here and get us going. So I'm going to have all of us just put our feet flat on the floor and just closing our eyes and placing our hands on our heart. And let us take a nice, deep, slow in-breath into our heart, deep into that sacred flame inside. Let us hold that breath as we connect with that crystalline diamond pure white light inside. And breathe it out through the mouth, nice and gently. And next in breath, let us breathe back all the way, nice and slow, deep into the center of our crystalline diamond heart. And allowing the breath to be held for a few seconds as we allow the consciousness to drop downwards through our lower chakras, all the way penetrating to the heart of Sophia Gaia and connecting with her heart into our sacred heart and breathing that out. And let us take another deep in breath in into the center of our crystalline diamond, glorious diamond heart. And as we hold this breath in here, let us draw the attention upwards through our higher chakras, upper chakras, passing through the soul star chakra, all the way up through the great central sun and to the center of source, the source of all creation in its crystalline diamond heart. Let us make that connection and breathe the breath out. And this next in breath, let us draw the breath all the way back into our crystalline diamond heart from this horizontal plane, connected in this vertical axis, and allow the breath as we hold it in to breathe all the way into the vertical, into the horizontal axis, all the way out into this crystalline, bubbling, dazzling bi-field light that we are in. Breathe it all the way out. And let us connect with this sphere of light we are all in. May it fully be blessed by the grace of divine love. Anything less than its divine perfection may not interact in any which way through this entire beautiful presentation today. And we ask for it to be radiant in the crystalline light. And again, only the highest, only the best, only the most gracious communicate through this portal of light today, as we welcome our beautiful brother into this now with his wisdom that is here to be shared upon our heart today. Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome to this hour. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so good to be here. And I'm going to get right into it because this walk of ascension has been so incredible for those of us who are on the leading edge, and doing this weekly show has been so beautiful to see where the signature of each ascension leader is and what their, I call it signature because it is a signature frequency that's coming in. And I want to know, where are you now in this moment, in this present now, as you've journeyed to this moment? What would you say this ascension walk truly is? Let's start with that.
You know, it's such a beautiful question, because having been at this for a long time and doing so much study, what's funny about that is it's not like I'm saying I regret the study, but if there's anything I know, it's that I don't know really anything on the physical level yet. You know, the space that I'm in now is, you know, even our license plate that says open is just being so wholly, fully open, that the funny thing is, it's taken me back to when I was a child, 7 years old, playing in the woods with, as crazy as it sounds to some people, you know, trans-dimensional beings, light beings. And it's like almost like the learning part of like all the Aramaic work that I do with ancient manuscripts and everything is just something to kind of lean on, but it's not really the key. The key for me is, you know, having my heart open. And when that space is open, that's really when the deepest levels of the communication happen. And that's how Magdalene moved in so beautifully. Remember the whole time I'm going, really, me? It's me, not self-deprecating, just like me, huh? Like, not, but then knowing that, you know, it wasn't about any kind of a specialness. It was just about being open. So if there's anything I'm really focused on at the moment, it's just seeking to be real and to be an open vessel, and hopefully not get in the way too much. So
yeah. I love that you said that, because it seems this has been coming up in the conversations that I've had with the guests. It seems like there's this journey has been like this kind of climbing mount, you know, one of the big mountains, whichever one you want to say. And it's been really rough on many levels, especially I feel those of us that chose to incarnate, to go through a lot of the experiences to transform and translate, to have the personal resurrection, the true resurrection within. And then it seems like we've gotten to this point over the hump now. Now that openness has truly opened up. And that's what I want to see where you were, because I feel like I'm in this space now where that nectar of the joy, the wonder has returned. And it's like, oh, like a whole new discovery. And all of these things have been fabulous, build up, fabulous. But now it's like this wonder has come in. And this seems to be with some of the other presenters I've read, that joyous of the inner child. And I can't help, because you have a brand new star being that's 8 months old now.
She'll be wow, so I guess tomorrow in calendar days she'll be 6 months. Really? Wow. July, August, September, October, November, December, 6 months. Wow. Okay. Whew, that was fast.
I'm sure yes. that has some kind of like extra frequency that has allowed you to experience through that wonderment, through her presence.
Yeah, and I tell you this, I mean, she's our fourth child, but and you know that we had her for our oldest daughter, who's now 23. Her and her husband haven't seemed to have been able to have a child. So she's Loretta and our baby, you know, product of that immense love. But she's sort of more with Loretta at the moment, but you know, within the next few months, she'll be with them more. And it's like this wow experience where, and of course, just being our fourth, I look back at who I was 23 years ago, or when we had the others, and I see how, not in a put down way toward myself, but I see how much more awake I am now, and I kind of wonder, not in a oh, but I wonder how many things I may have missed because I just wasn't as conscious then. But the gift and the treasure that she really gives is the present moment. And just thinking about her, I just want to squeeze her.
Yeah.
But which I just was. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And
what a blessing.
it is that, because that Holy Spirit, I've come to really, not from scriptures, nothing, I've come to really taste. It is in that innocence. And there are times when I'm sitting in meditation, like this morning with the group that I'm leading with the biofield, there's a moment that I drop in. It is complete innocence of that Holy Spirit, but it's the child that's just like dropped literally from heaven's gateway down here. And the experience of it, like I can feel it in my 50 trillion cells, all of them experiencing that. And it's very much the experience when I see it, one of these sacred beings that are like 6 months, 7 months old, and when you're in the presence, you can't help yourself. You like it just you raise so quickly to the vibration. It's unbelievable what transformers they are. And
Yeah, it's instant. It's instantaneous as soon as you make the connection. You know, if you're open, and I've seen people that didn't look open, they look at her and they're just like, you know, I don't usually like babies, but that one glows. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, a lot of them coming through now are just so many friends we've had that are having children, and they're just so much more conscious
yeah.
than they were. It's not an imagination thing, it's really happening.
Do you feel they're much more conscious, or is it that you find that the consciousness of the planet, the consciousness of humanity has raised enough that can recognize that and it can actually experience it?
Yeah, it's probably both,
Again,
actually. Yeah,
yeah.
they're, you know, that's such a beautiful insight. You know, they're inseparable. So, yeah, absolutely.
So I remember, like, when I was receiving that, these ones coming in after 2018, they're all pure diamond ray. They have no karma, nothing coming in, and they're piercing diamond in their crystalline clarity. They're carrying both the SophiaKryst light with them, and that's why the radiance is like that, and helping on the planet for us to, those of us that came a little bit, or before them, to raise our vibration with those codex of light, so our ascension walk can become a little bit more anchored, embodied, to match just closer to them, so that we can create the platforms for their magnificence that are here, that what they're bringing into earth with the new realities and the new constructs and all the magnificence, so that we can be the proper containers in housing their light here on earth.
Yeah, you know, I've definitely, like I say, if there's anything I know, it's that I don't know, you know, that I'm open. And of course, the most important thing in birth is, of course, being open. It's allowing the birth. And, you know, if there's anything I've really been integrating over the past few years, it's realizing, like I kind of mentioned earlier, getting out of my own way, getting out of the way of the opening of the birth, realizing that my beliefs, philosophies, you know, religious ideas, even things like studies or things that I'm so sure of in my life, my history, whatever it may be, none of that really means anything.
Yeah.
What, you know, it really needs to be framed within that aspect of light, of consciousness, of awareness, of love. And if it's not, it's not doing anything but sort of building a stone in front of the opening of the mouth of God, as I would say, which is, they speak of, moving the stone, to get to yet when, of course, where Yeshua had been entombed. And it's interesting that stone, it's really an impediment over the mouth of God. Where's the mouth of God? And when we start realizing this, that we get in our own way, but these babies are coming in and they're showing us that it's not about what we're doing. It's about having the open heart, and then whatever kind of calibration, vibrational frequency things need to happen, they'll happen organically. That'll just organically unfold.
Yes.
We're always trying to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to, because this system has been in place since long before we were here, and it'll be here long after. But that eternal nature of our being is untouched, and that's what these babies represent.
So you mentioned something so powerful, because this getting out of the way. So it's such a huge part of this ascension journey in the art of allowing, and it's the art of alchemy, correct? So with our audience, if you'd like to share, what are some of the ways in which you recognize you were in your own way, and what are some of the ways or things that you sort of unveil within yourself that you moved it into this allowing?
I easily, right on top of that for me is, letting go of my lionization of thought. I sort of, being born in the 1970s, raised in the 80s and 90s, the new age was moving, and I was really a part of that going back, over 30 years ago. And there was all this sort of 20th century change your thoughts, change your life thing. And it never quite clicked for me. I'm like, hold on a second. Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. That's not it at all. It's not about the thinking. It's not about the thought. And of course, IBM senior scientists were taking pictures of the waves that leave a mind when you think a thought. So people were looking at thoughts as it had some kind of a creative power. And I'm looking at the ancient teachings. They don't talk about thought that way. They talk about feeling that way. They speak of thought as the crystallization and or effect of feeling. And when I say feeling, I don't mean emotions, happy, sad, but walking into a room and, again, being open, noticing that my thoughts are there, just let go of the thought aspect and allow myself to feel frequency and vibration, meaning the movement of air on my skin. How does it smell? How does it feel to me? What's happening in my little star tetrahedron, in my heart? And being aware on such a level that I don't need to enunciate that in the thoughts, because feeling is the true power of creation. It's feeling. Absolutely. And what happens is that will ultimately crystallize if we focus upon it in the thought. But what we think is in our life, all that our thought is framing the movie that's on the screen that's not real, because what we're looking for is what is looking. We're not the movie. That's just the divine play, as Yogananda call it. We are the light that's watching. And when I started seeing that, going, wait, why is everybody worshiping thought? Changing your thoughts doesn't change your life. It changes how you frame something that's not there in the first place, because we've never had an accurate thought in our life. They're all delusions of a mind that's not there in the first place. What mind? The mind that's separate from God. Well, that's not what's real. Yeah. What's real is the seeing. Yeah. And letting go of all those sort of Western psychology ideas about thought is what ultimately took me from trying to figure things out to realizing that innate GPS, the guidance, the knowing was already there. Yeah. So I didn't have to keep chasing anymore. And it's funny, people are like, oh my God, but you've studied thousands of books. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay. So there's information in my head, but
yeah. This is also another thing about ascension, right? The ascension journey. Just because you put your devotion, discipline, commitment in, say, that area of study, and you develop that, it serves its purpose. And if one of the things that all of us agree, how many times we also released that, then we went to another one, then we went to another one, because it was always evolving and evolving, because the consciousness was able to then receive the inner sight differently. And from that, it again, and it was another realized, the real eyes within open. And it feels like layers and layers and layers. And all those thoughts, you know, that the restaurant idea and all this is, I think, therefore I am, all of those I really feel serve their purpose on the planet, where the consciousness at that moment, at that time, was able to perceive it, because so many more people have been in their head than their heart. So naturally, they couldn't just come to the heart. That served its purpose. But those of us have moved to our heart, now that doesn't even resonate, because we can experience it through the visceral experience of the energies of motions, but through the feeling, the visceral direct experience. And all the masters always pointed at to the kingdom, the queendom, all of that within. It is in the heart. You get to have the direct experience, and then you let go of everything else again and again and again.
Yeah. It's funny because, I mean, there's so many words that you've used that I adore. One is nectar, you mentioned earlier. I speak of that sweet nectar of immortality, and you know, speaking of the heart, which there's this idea of, like, what did heart mean in the ancient Aramaic? The word is liba. And for years I saw it translated as source of thinking. And I'm like, that's not it. It's not the source of thinking. I'm like, it's the source of feeling. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not confusing that with emotion. Emotion is between what we would call our ego, our persona, and the true inherent nature of our divinity. If it's in harmony with that eternal nature, we'll feel joy, peace, presence, ecstasy, you know, prosperity, abundance. If it's out of harmony, then we'll feel the sadness, the depression, things of that nature. It's not quite that simple. I'm just trying to nutshell it. But feeling, on the other hand, the first place of recognition that we feel that happens in the heart, and it moves across all of the systems of the body almost instantaneously. And it's amazing. The heart works not just on this beautiful free flow, but it works with stress too. It needs that almost. It needs some sense of a resistance in the world of duality in order to have that appearance of being living. And that's the beauty of us with thought, and being able to not kind of turn our back on it, but realize, you know, there's kind of a compartmentalization aspect to thinking that allows you to, you know, if things are really kind of hitting the fan, so to speak, you can kind of use thought to go, okay, let's get really analytical here. Do I go that way or that way, etc. And, you know, if people like you and I, bless our hearts, or Michael, or anybody, you know, drop us into the middle 1950s, nobody would have, we would have just been speaking gibberish to most people, bless their hearts. And there were people, Manly P. Hall 100 years ago, you know, there's certain souls that had popped out that were just these wunderkinds, where the chokmah was so wide open through them. And it's interesting to see a lot of the stuff they were trying to teach through thought systems, because you could almost tell that they were restrained by the culture on some level, but yet they kept their hearts open and they did what they needed to do. And now it's amazing because it's all happening simultaneously. It's like anything that could happen is happening, and all of the energy is just wide open flow, and the babies are a part of that. And, you know, people say, how do I know there's a great awakening happening? I'm like, because people weren't talking like this on a mass scale back in the 70s or the 80s. You know, or even the early 90s. That's how I know, because we're having the conversation like this.
You know, again, like with yours, you touched on several areas, and I love to hear your intake on this too, on this ascension journey, the walk of ascension. Ultimately, when we get to this place after meeting, and we're going to continuously meet the triggers that come, the encounters that allow this resurrection light to truly become accessible, and that victorious wings of freedom that we get to embrace, and so that the walk becomes more fluid in its alchemized state. Yet getting there takes a while, because it's all these encounters are part of it, all these triggers are part of it, and it's over and over, like you're sent back to the drawing board again and again and again, until it becomes that becoming. It's not even awakening. I feel it's the remembrance that becomes so this word realize, it's for me, is the real eyes that is not this eye, the real eyes of the heart that begins to truly see, and it's seeing from a whole different lens that's completely grand, and it can grasp consciousness at a level in which it wasn't able to. So from there, this ascension walk becomes more than the sweet walk, and it becomes the fluidity, like those energies of emotions that are emotions, that becomes like the liquid light within that gets to viscerally be experienced. It's become so experiential. And I keep remembering that yesterday we had this experience with our group where you become the Christ, not, again, it moves away. You become the Buddha, not following Buddha, not following Christ. You become in its remembrance. Wow, this is what it is. And it becomes the presence, like the container of that presence in these holy garments. And it's like a game changer. Game changer. And that's why it requires layers and layers coming off again and again, because another garment, it's like the robes, right, changed, and then another garment came in. Now it's like, wow, here's this one now, and the discovery, and I'm finding it more and more of celebration walk now. Are you finding that?
That's beautiful. You know, celebration is the affirmation. It's the recognition of our eternal nature. It's the interesting thing that we sort of do as humans. We strive to become more of something that we already are. And a lot of people don't realize the nexus of the cross. Yeah. There's references to the Southern Cross, you know, obviously in the sky, but the north-south, should I say, the up and down, the vertical aspect of the cross is our eternal nature, unborn, undying, is the absolute. And then there's that human self, which is the horizontal. And we suffer at the cross point. The word crux or excruciate means to suffer at the crux, which is the cross point. What does it mean to excruciate? It's that aspect where we're longing and trying to add things to our persona to become more of something that we already are. And that's all part of the human experience, but we can get into spaces where we're actually denying our own divinity. As an example, you know, I put up a video on YouTube recently about from the Essene Gospel of Peace, and the quote is, "The scripture is dead." The word on the page is dead. It's actually in your blood, in your bones, etc. It's in the air, or it's in the breath in your lungs, etc. And when you start realizing that we've been having these, you know, these relationships with thought-based concepts on a page, in books, whatever, which isn't a bad thing, but to realize that it's not necessarily the relationship with the concept. What I said years ago, I was always talking about information versus transformation, or I would also say truth is a direct experience, and starting to realize that these are great guideposts, these are great milestones. The study, it allows that self-reflective nature, so that ultimately we can realize, oh, wait a second, the map is not the terrain. Maybe I can lay the map down. And not necessarily all the time have these really wide open experiences. And if people don't know what that feels like, go find a baby. Just look, just be in the space. You'll find out what it means to realize that there's nothing we can say about body systems and cardiovascular functioning and all that, that'll ever, not that there's not value in that, that'll ever be able to touch just seeing a newborn and looking there and having that experience of pure love. It's funny. It's, I have no words for that. And I
You've
mean,
also,
that's the kingdom. You add that, everything else comes after. So
yeah, it's so, it's beautiful that there's this attempt, right, in this human garment, and the merging of the bodies, the gap closing from its highest expression that's trickled down and then coming here. And there's that attempt. There's this, I want to say attempt, not from a place of effort, but the desire from within, that burning desire of that flame that wants to express itself so freely from this garment that's been borrowed to come here. And there are times, like when I'm teaching this, especially this biofield meditation, that I get to experience, and my students get to experience, just a little window of the Holy Christed body then drops in here, and it's like, wow. So this is that effort, that burning desire, because it just wants to close this gap to experience its full, continuous sound of divinity within. That is so, that's just pure symphony of love, and that's it. And it doesn't want to have any interference between the physical, emotional, mental, etheric, spiritual body. Like, it's fluid in its movement, and that is what we were as ancient Atlantean beings. We knew how to use this ancient technology of the earth, water, fire, and air in its alchemy, which was so fluid in these four bodies, where we could experience without limitations the divine qualities. And I feel we're returning in remembrance of that, one by one by one. We get little glimpses of it, so it can sustain a little bit more till it becomes more as a container.
Yeah, this is the first time in history that on a public, you could say, mass social level, that we're starting to look back at, whether it be Lemuria or Atlantis or some kind of cultures that, funny, seem like mythology, but when you start looking at when the actual flood did happen, that we know for a fact, and you start looking at a lot of these things, it's like, whoa, that brings to mind the thought of, speaking of that, that the longing, and the way you said it, I had like God bumps where you mentioned about that sound, that sound of eternity. And it got me thinking of Rumi, how Jalaluddin Rumi had spoken of the reed flute, and the reason the reed flute has such a mourning, longing, mournful sound is because it's been plucked from its source. And when you blow the breath of life through that flute into those lungs, essentially, the sound of longing is the sound of its yearning, longing to realize its own union, to come back together again. And what's interesting is, even though there's some kind of apparent separation there, it actually hasn't left. We haven't left the divine at all, except here. It's funny because people will ask me sometimes, they'll be like, can you do like a more feminine translation of the Lord's Prayer so it's not so dualistic? And I'm like, I can do whatever I want, but then I think what's happening is I'm not honoring a bit of what's actually there on the page. And to me, the magic, as an example of the Our Father, the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, is that it's Yeshua almost in this human body, looking back at eternity, at that divine nature, the absolute, and saying, I know we're not separate. I know that we are absolutely one, yet I'm having this experience in duality. And there's a longing there that sometimes I do feel separate. Sometimes I do feel that I need to invoke that knowing, that deeper experience as the absolute. To me, that's the beauty of the prayer. But I think a lot of people, again, they're sort of kind of trying to put the cart before the horse, and they want like frilly language. And that's what happened with the King James Bible. It's not a bad Bible. It's poetically beautiful. It's got a lot of issues to it. There's a lot of politics wrapped into it, politics, economy, religion. But again, it's another one of those examples that if we could just allow ourselves to come back to the heart. And another word you use that I adore is visceral, which comes from the Latin viscera, which literally means, guts, intestines, etc. The word in Aramaic would be rachma. The word in Koine Greek is paradedon. And what that actually, or no, splagchna is the Greek word. And what that actually means is an experience that's so deep, so profound that there's literally a quaking in the center of not only spiritual being, but the physical being. Those visceral experiences are those. And it's like you could study 5,000 books, but yet one space of openness in conscious breath work, in deep meditation, will eclipse. And it doesn't mean stop reading, but it'll eclipse all that. And it's funny, you'll know that it's a true, deep, integrative experience because you don't have words to explain it. And that's when you know it's really there. So
that's exactly, and this is also for the audience, because a lot of times when we say we fall from short in capturing it, because the reason why, because the words, they're condensed more. And of course, they each have a vibration. But within this, I'm going to go back to the meditation that I'm like, my quote is part of my meditation group as well. So him and I are in a sacred divine union. And it's interesting, both of us, as I'm leading, I'm also experiencing, I'm journeying in this 30 days. So it's a full 30 days experience that we go through layer by layer. And what's so amazing about this is, within this space, there's a space that through the breath that it drops in, literally drops in the vertical horizontal axis, and the sphere of light within all these spheres within the bodies open up, and that fluidity moves. And then you drop into the sound, and the sound of creation, in which that through that spark of life you were first created, it becomes accessible. It is so fulfilling in its wholeness that there's a direct experience where us in a union, we're noticing like our sexual energies change because the fulfillment is so fulfilling. And he's leading the sacred masculine group. He's discovering this whole other thing. And you get to, I feel when you get to directly experience how whole you truly are a wonderment of creation in form, and that creation is a living daily miracle of life, and it's accessible. It changes dynamics of relationship because the inner relation has changed. So the body responds, like the body starts changing physically, and the outer relations shift and change. And I feel those in unions like him and I, we're going through this very interesting change because of that direct experience. And he's having his direct, I'm having my own. So our union is then being rebirthed in a whole new experience and stuff that we can't even have a words for because we're lacking words. We're just experiencing the sound of it right now.
God, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's funny because the word, in the beginning of the Gospel of John, Yochanan in Aramaic, it says Bereshit eto wihua milta. Milta is the word translated as word, but it's interesting because what they'll do when they translate it is they'll say word with a capital W or capital T, the capital W word. But what's an interesting thing is in Aramaic, the word would actually be mela,
Mm.
Mela would be the word for word. The word milta genders it feminine. What does that mean? So what that means, I have a battery here. My perception of the feminine
Yeah.
is, or excuse me, my perception of the battery is feminine. The actual battery itself is masculine. The masculine is obvious. It's something, it's manifest, which literally manus festus is obvious as my own hand, coming from the Latin. So when you start understanding that the kingdom isn't malku, is the word in Aramaic where it's a line in the sand and now you've gone beyond your physical boundary. It's not it in Aramaic, malkuta or melta. In other words, it can't be a word on a page.
Yeah.
This is something that even translators won't let go of because of their theology. It is your experience of the actual vibration, sound, frequency itself as you're in that conscious experience of that coming through you.
Yeah.
Nothing, which is exactly the kingdom, of course. It's nothing to do with a place. It's nothing to do with something on a page. And we're starting to wake up to this. And it's the fun thing. This was known many, many thousands of years ago. And little bits kind of made it through the culture in such a way that people are going, hey, wait a second. Maybe it's not about accumulating all this stuff on me. Gnosis, Gnosticism, gnosis doesn't mean knowledge. It's funny, people will say it means knowledge. I'm like, it doesn't mean knowledge in any way, shape, or form. That's knowledge. In order to not have knowledge, you have to have a duality of a knower plus that which you know. There needs to be a two-ness there. Gnosis, that may have worked as a translation 100 years ago. Gnosis is direct realization. It's you being that flow of the very thing that you previously had a conceptual awareness of. So it's not knowledge. You literally, whatever that is, I am. And that's the true gnosis. It's tapping into that.
That's
and
right.
it's happening. It's happening with so many people now, and the young kids. I've got like 9-year-olds in my events. It's like, what in the world? And they're coming up and asking me these questions.
Yeah.
And I've got 6-year-olds asking me, like, I can tell, I know God is not separate. So how come everybody talks about God like God is separate? I think like God is everything that we're within. And I'm like, how old are you? So
I know.
yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. And you mentioned something about some of those that ends with ah, and that ah sound. So, one of the things I discovered through some of these private sessions that I would do, I would get into a space where I could then tap into the individual soul signature, the way that they were first created from creation, the sounds, but I had to get into an octave of light where I could access this in the session.
No, I understand. Yeah.
But the way, because I don't sing, none of that, I have none of those, but somehow when I get into this octave, somehow I can see the sound, the way that golden spiral is, and sound of that, and somehow the dips of it would go into ah, and then it was like this ah, and this continuous vibration, and that's what it was, always in sound, not within the word, the sound of it that attempted to capture what it was. And with many of these masters that walked on earth, that recognized it was always within the interaction of the sound that they got to have the direct experience. And I feel that's why, much more so, again, because of the consciousness of the planet, Sophia Gaia rise within herself, all these beautiful souls coming in, all these crystalline activations that so many of us have been part of bringing to the planet. There's been sound healing the last, my gosh, like 5 years, it's gone nuts, sound healing. Why? Because people are recognizing when they're around that sound, there's something inside that is communicating back to them what their true essence is, and they get little glimpses of it until they realize their own sounds that want to come out to help them on their ascension journey. And I love these conversations, because these are the conversations that allow audiences to discover more of themselves, and having permission to have just permission to know, okay, I'm experiencing this too. So it's not, again, so lonely. It's not, dinosaur age where, these were like so not talked about.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean the ta genders would gender a word feminine. It's ta aleph. That sound ah. It's the first letter of virtually all alphabets. And it's interesting because ah has two sounds. One would be a form of ah or a or all the forms that like an a would, but that's just one aspect of it is that sound that we enunciate and we speak that ah. The other sound that the aleph has is this silence,
Yeah.
because it represents the all, the everything. The original letter in Proto-Semitic was like a circle with horns. It represented an ox or a bull. And the reason that was because the ox was prized for having this tremendous strength because it used its entire body holistically in a state of wholeness, meaning that true strength can only exist when we are whole, when we are undivided, in that aspect, in that sense. And when that ah sound radiates, when that ah sound comes forth, that is an expression of, I use the word oneness sometimes, but I have problems with oneness because it's like with oneness, your brain's thinking, okay, there's the oneness. I've been using the word absolute more because there's no way to frame the absolute or the ground of all, the ground of all being. But even that's kind of dualistic, or pure potentiality, whatever words I can come up with. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. It's a finger pointing at the moon. But the ah sound is just one of those sounds that if you pay attention, it's interesting how what happens in the release of stress, that serenity. It's interesting too because in some Aramaic and Hebrew words it's not voiced. Like bereshit is not bereshit in the beginning, it's actually bereshit, and it's not voiced. It's actually silent, but it allows movement in the word. When you start realizing things like that, just people ask me all the time if I want to tone or use a sound. I'm like, just make the ah sound. They're like, what pitch? I'm like, your pitch is going to change all day long. You're going to wake up, it'll be a little lower, and it's going to go a little higher, and then maybe later in the day it'll go really low and then start going higher again before you go to sleep. It's going to move all over because it's not that there's a magic pitch. It's that you're open to the awareness of whatever that resonant frequency is right now. How do you get to that place? Just move around, feel, come back to the heart level of it, and you'll find it. And when you mention, you seeing the arc of things and the shape and almost the colors, all that's here all the time. It's the source of everything that we are. But we get so locked into the intellectual concepts, which aren't bad things, but it helps, or sort of, kind of brings us to a place where we forget that we already are what we're looking for.
Yeah. So good. So just tickled. So good. So I want to take us to what's coming up for you now. Where you're focused now with your services, because all of that shifting, and anything you want to share with our audience that they can in touch with you. But I want to share something with you before you go there. Okay. So when I was born, I didn't have a name because my mom could not, she went and had me early and she could not put a name on me at all. So it was 3 months later that she went to her cousin's house and they're like, did you name her? Could you believe almost 3 months, so I had no name. So finally, her cousin and her began having this conversation while I'm there, and her cousin tells her the story of, this was Prophet Muhammad's cousin, HoniB, and who had Prophet Muhammad. And so she was the first female fighter in the battles of Karbala with her son. So she was the mother of HoniB. So then my first name begins with HoniB. And I remember for years, I wanted my spiritual name. All these people had Parashakti, this. I wanted my spiritual name. So in one of the retreats I was teaching in Mexico, I went and met this beautiful Mayan elder, and everybody, imagine 20 people got their spiritual names. So I was like, waiting. And he came, pulled me aside. He's like, no. I said, no, what? He's like, I can't give you a name. I said, what do you mean? I earned it. I
I
deserve
want my
it.
name.
Yoga meditation I've done. And he said, no, you have your name. I said, what do you mean? He said, your name, Mahani. I said, what, that name? I wouldn't wanted to run away from it. So he said, no, that's your, do you know that name? I was like, nothing, because zero disconnect, total disconnect. And it took me years later. I still feel like I'm not mature enough to own the name, because the way I knew I have to be, I just turned 50 this year. After
So
this,
did I. Cool.
you're both 72. And after this, began to own, because it came, my everything's in that sound. Oh man. And then the mother of, so that there's so much wisdom in that. And that's why the last several years I've been moving towards sound, but the inner sound opening, this sound that I can't even put words. I never ever imagined this was even in me or capable, nothing. But I can see the direction through the sound and the name, bridging the gap of what is to be bring forth in the wisdom. I honestly feel very immature to handle that name. I'm playing until I'm mature enough to own it,
Well, that's the nectar, right? The honey. So it works out. It's cool.
Exactly.
Wow.
So please tell us, what is it that you're offering now? And yeah, just let us know.
Well, I mean, my book, Echoes of an Ancient Dream, Aramaic Toning on the Path of Light, that's on Amazon. I put I'm really focused on YouTube, and I also put stuff on like TikTok and other places. I don't look at what's out there. I kind of put my stuff up, and there it goes. I'm like, I'll put it out into that chaos and, bless it that it gets to where it needs to go. But, my after about 12 years on the road away from my family, it looks romantic, being out there, but you kind of get stuck out there. It's speaking at all these different places, and I'd be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And it was about 7 years ago when I came home just as my first book was coming out. And then I started mentoring. I started working one-on-one with people. And it was interesting because at first I'm like, well, am I going to be able to get the buzz? Am I going to be able to get, that high that I get from having a group of people? And it's amazing that being able to work one-on-one with someone and to be able to on Zoom, look in their eyes, or local ones, even face to face, and really be able to work with people on a level of kind of maybe helping them avoid some of the traps that I had, or maybe get somewhere a little bit quicker, or also be able to, I had mentors in my life that were people that, I would just have a tunnel vision about something and it could be something great. Let me explain it this way. Let's say that you've got a really nice high fidelity stereo system and you get it tuned in perfectly and you got the greatest sound you've ever heard on this beautiful quadraphonic, stereo surround system. And then a mentor comes and they go, wait a second here. And you were like, wait a second, there was a blanket over my speakers. And all of a sudden there's this presence and this, and that's the magic of working with someone one-on-one, is you can kind of take a blanket off from someone's bias and then be able to have the space to really be with them. I would speak to places and I'd have to get it in a little nutshell. And I can only, if it was some places, I'd only have 20 minutes. And I'd have to get in and get out, and I could only scratch the surface because people would go, whoa, too much, too much. But then when you're working deeply with one person at a time, you're able to really go deep like that. But so for me, my big focus at the moment is, I still do live events, etc. I'll be down in Houston, Texas, like the 6th and 7th of January. I'm on podcasts and things. But my focus is mostly between the mentoring process and creating these audio visual like mini films on YouTube. And a lot of times I end up putting them on Facebook, uploading them to Facebook, because if I put a YouTube video on Facebook, the algorithms grab it, nobody sees it. So go and upload it to Facebook, But for me, I'm just in that space of expression. And I think the thing I've really been focused in on lately is letting everybody know you're not alone. The weirdness that you're feeling, the oddity, the feeling left out, like you don't know what's going on. You feel like you're not part of a group, of a whatever that may be, of a tribe. I'm like, you actually are. We're all experiencing this. You know, people are like, wow, you made a video about light workers who have suicidal thoughts. I'm like, well, let's talk about all this. I'm like, no, you don't want to sit in that for a long time. But if that comes up, that's something, you know, there's ways you can look at that and process that and not bite its hook, so to speak. So for me, it's the focus or the difference between, you know, the mentoring, and I'm doing a lot on YouTube, and then we send a lot out sort of support messages on my email list as well. But
And all of that would
it's
be
been
on
nice.
this YouTube link below. So once we finish, it will be available here as well for my audience. And for those that know us, that they also will be able to access yours and receive from this incredible wisdom that you're sharing. It's so beautiful. It's so bountiful. You know, I really feel the bountifulness of it. And it is the grace. I really, Michael and I really resonate with grace. And thank you for being so gracious with what you're serving on the planet through your signature, your essence, that divine essence in your ascension journey that has been able to have a bit of a language around its expression, which becomes magnetized, right? And people get drawn to the way in which this is being allowed in your art of allowing. So I'm so thankful you gave the opportunity to be the guest today. Really, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just so wonderful. And so much love to you and Loretta and your family, and gosh, all the services, and also the audience that were able to be present today in receiving. And I feel like what we covered today, there was a lot of activating sort of like balls, so that
it's always best to re-listen, because you don't hear most of it on the first pass. You kind of listen and listen and listen, and then things will sort of, it's almost like lights opening up on a grid. They just start sparking and coming.
There's like little spheres of light you tapped in, and then it can draw in. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. The most important thing about this on this ascension walk is sharing. So as you receive this, if it benefited you once I upload this now, please reshare it. Let others also benefit, because this is the gift of coming together and allowing this vortex to be experienced, so that you can receive and then you share it. So we want this fountain always flowing and blessing everyone on the way. So thank you so much. Thank you again for being our guest. Thank you, everyone, and much love to all of us.